In this podcast, Dr. Jason Brooks from Catalyst Leadership Group talks about the future of leadership through transformative times. So, stay tuned. So, welcome everyone to Jobs of Future podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. Today we have with us Dr. Jason Brooks. In a brief bio, Dr. Jason is an executive entrepreneur, consultant, and leadership psychologist, best-selling author, and speaker with over 24 years of demonstrated results in the design, implementation, and evaluation of leadership and organizational development, organizational effectiveness, and human capital management solutions, growing leaders and enhancing workforce performance and overall individual and company success. Growth and a result-oriented, high-impact executive leader with experience in startups, high-growth, operationally mature, multi-million and multi-billion-dollar companies in multiple industries. With that, Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I need you to write all of my promo introductions. That was great.
Oh, it's yes. I'm excited to learn more. I think one thing when I find very fascinating when I was looking at your profile was your basically your journey. Like you are pretty much involved in helping leaders understand and sort of stay sane in this world of hyper transformations. So definitely, before we jump into the leadership aspect and the future of leadership, love to know your perspective on, love to know your journey, like what bring you here and what has been your past, if you can walk us through that.
Yeah. So I was born on a cold winter's. No, I'm just kidding. I won't go back there. No, I guess my leadership journey really started out, during elementary school and coming up. I was always the person that folks would go to, would have a conversation with. And even though I didn't know what it was at that time, there was just something, there was a makeup in me that allowed that type of opportunity. And when I graduated from high school, I then moved on, got my undergraduate degree from Purdue University with my major in general management, minors in human resources and psychology. So, my bent has always been toward, the individual within an organizational context. And very quickly through my career, I had the opportunity to progress through and progress up. This was during a time that technology first started to come out. I remember when the internet was the new thing, and I remember, gosh, is this ever gonna take off? But so I had the opportunity to work at a variety of organizations, from hospitality, distribution, manufacturing, consulting, kind of all of those. And I remember I was working at a company, some of your guests may be familiar with this, called Cracker Barrel Old Country Stores. They've got restaurant concepts, and I was the corporate human resources director there. And I remember I was sitting in my office and I was getting ready to terminate the employment of somebody that had been there with us for, about 6 years. And again, very, very successful career that I had had. And I sat down with this gentleman, and I was going to terminate his employment for attendance. But here's the thing. I knew that his issue was not attendance. He had recently found out that his wife was having an affair and they were separated. His older teenage daughter had just found out that she was pregnant, and younger teenage son was dealing with some drugs and alcohol in the juvenile system. And I sat down and I told this guy, I said, today's your last day. And he put his head down in his hands and sat there for about 30 seconds. And he looked up and he had tears in his eyes and he said, I understand. Thank you. And at that point, I made the decision that my life was going to mean more than rules and regulation and policy and procedure. So mid-career, I went back to school. I got my master's degree in mental health counseling. Then I continued on and got my doctorate in psychology. And my focus of my dissertation turned back to an organizational context and working with high impact leaders and helping to build balance in their lives and kind of understanding how imbalance impacts work stress in leaders. And then a glutton for punishment, I continued on and got my MBA after that. So I've spent about 21 years of my life in school, but I tell you, the thing that I love is being able to come in, work with high potential leaders to grow them from the inside out, to make a difference in their life, their family, their team, their organization, their community. That for me is what success is, what I just love to do.
Interesting, and thank you so much for walking us through that. In your current role, you are a busy guy. Like I look, so you are involved with like. Walk us through your today. Like what keeps you busy? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast today.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple of things. First, I have a full-time role where I am the chief people officer for an addiction and mental health treatment company. We have a national footprint, multiple campuses, and again, addiction, mental health issues is just a continuing growing issue. So I was part of the founding team to create that organization. In addition to that, in my free time, whatever that is. I have I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of writing. I've got a leadership consulting firm called the Catalyst Leadership Group that I'm so passionate about, bringing leadership solutions in a lot of different ways. And so, for me, sometimes I hate to say the term busy, because oftentimes we could be busy without having an impact. But, for me, it is just, how can I make an impact in every person's life that I have the opportunity to work with today?
Interesting, fascinating, and thank you for showing your journey. So you talked about impact, and I think that's even like when I was looking at your profile, that word was pretty evident. It showed up in leadership and impact. I think that's what and I heard that word even in your pitch quite a few times. So what is high impact leadership? If you can walk us through your perception or sort of your perspective on what does that really mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're exactly right. I did select the word impact for a very specific reason. And sometimes we talk about high performance or high value or high, fill in the blank. But for me, high impact really is a leader that is able to connect with and guide individuals that lead to their success and the organization's success. And that's really what impact's all about. The reality is we spend so much time working in and through others. Sometimes we get results that we're striving for that leads to value to our shareholders, to our stakeholders, to the individual, and then sometimes there's not. Sometimes we could be, to use a term, so busy that we get caught in the activity and not really in the impact. So for me, impact is that the results through others that have a value in the organization and other people's lives.
Interesting. So when you talk about impact, I think, and this is my perception, and tell me like what's your perspective on that? So impact, whenever I think of an impact, I think of either the magnitude or the depth of the impact, right? So whatever I did really well, and it cast a sort of some impact. And the other thing is the spread of it, right? So it just how far and wide it reaches. So when it comes to leadership, is there any definition of which one is better or which one is worse, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's really a combination of both. Really what you talked about was depth and breadth, right? Depth is what difference can I make today with the small group of folks? Maybe let's dig in really deep. Breadth is being able to touch a lot of people at the same time. So, I think it's really a combination of both. And what leaders have to do is recognize in the moments that they're at, how are they able to bring the greatest impact in that moment? So, for example, if I'm speaking to a group of 5,000 people, the reality is I'm going to have a whole lot better breadth. You know, I've got a room of 5,000 people, but I'm not going to be able to go really deep for, you know, the value or the issues of any one person. But if I'm doing executive coaching and I'm working with a particular individual, I'm not necessarily worried about everything else that's going on in the world. But boy, I'm going to really hone in on where you are. Where are you struggling? What can we do to bring some solutions that are going to move you forward? So it's being able to move back and forth in those paradigms, getting that great balance. But ultimately, it's also aligning an individual's potential with the impact that you're going to make. And that's something that for leaders is so important, that you can't treat everyone the same. So it's looking at each person, where their potential is, and then how we can help to unleash that in every encounter that we have.
Interesting. I think, and thank you so much for walking us through that. I think one of the things that I recall from my conversation with my fellow sort of workers or leaders in other organizations is, hey, so the argument is these small, I think you talked about that individual use case or that individual gentleman who's about to lose his job. The very fact of the empathy in that, and the very aspect of sort of connecting with that soul and trying to understand what they represent in your big corporate template. Whenever I talk to most of my folks, and maybe I'm from a data science world, so it's more honed around the data, but what I hear back is, hey, you know what, if I keep working on the individual sort of the depth perception, I would rather create sort of a very massive impact, and probably something will trickle down from there on and get something. And the very aspect of empathy that actually all time the need of this is all time high is missing from the leadership, because they don't really connect with the individual soul. They say, hey, I have like 17,000 people that I have to manage. That pretty much means that you don't manage anyone, right? So that's what I'm hearing from that is that. So what's your perspective on some of those leadership challenges? How would you sort of interpret that? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I tell you what, that is a great point. And that's a huge challenge for a lot of leaders today, especially in high growth businesses. Because the reality is, we like to think that simplicity comes through standardization and through process, and oftentimes, even in the strategy work that I do as well. And this is not going to be earth shattering, but this is just the way I talk about it. I look at each organization as having an organizational engine. And in that engine, you have your people, you have your processes, and you have your systems. Okay, earth shattering. I know. I'm sure no one else has ever heard that before. But here's the thing: you have to have a good balance of all of those. If you put all of your focus on process to the exclusion of the people side, it's going to become very mechanistic. And we're just going to be looking at policy and procedure as opposed to people. If we put too much focus on it being systemic, we lose the humanity of what we do. If we put too much on people, sometimes the reality is people are messy. We're dealing with all different kinds of things. So we have to have a good balance of all of those in order to really move forward quickly and with great stability and strength.
Interesting. And from your vantage point, how are you seeing the leadership sort of style change over the years? Like what's your perspective on how folks who are joining this leadership ranks are behaving, or what are some of the things that jumps out that you're concerned about, or something that you think, okay, yeah, that's good, that's a good sign of hope? So if you can walk us through that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, with the globalization of our economy, the complexity is just increasing exponentially.
Mm,
So, whether you are a large company that operates in the global landscape, or you may be a small company that may not necessarily have direct connections internationally, there are implications that are going to impact our businesses. Okay. So, I think there's a degree, number one, of needing to truly understand from a global context how business works in those ways. I think number two, leaders need to be focused on is just the speed of how things are always changing. And the reality is the era of being able to have 100% of the information available in order to make a decision has really passed. And, I firmly believe that you've got to get to that tipping point where it's typically around probably 65 to 70% of the information that's available that leaders need to be able to determine for themselves. And then when you have that much information, you need to go ahead and make a decision. Because if you wait until you have 100%, you're going to miss your opportunity to act. Now, if you react too soon, then you may not have all of the information that you need in order to make a valuable decision. So, I think those are two things that for me, leaders need to be even more aware of. And I love to help leaders with this, is just understand the global context of the workplace, how to make decisions in the right way. And then, I think the third thing is really navigating change. And the speed of change continues to increase. And there, we could probably talk half the day on the dynamics and the mechanics of psychology and behavior and all those type of things that lead to successful change. But I think those are the things that I'm seeing as real catalysts for leaders that they need to be focused on today and into the near future.
Interesting. I think you raise a very interesting point about sort of globalization, right? So right now, many of the leaders are thinking of world in a very global template, right? So they are looking at sort of. I think I remember, like, I was reading the book on, I think, Steve Jobs, in which he was recently fired from maybe I think it was Walt Disney, Pixar, and then he went to, say, a village in Italy, and he was drinking a coffee, and then right across, so he was thinking, hey, this is such a wonderful coffee, and no one shows up here, and right across the street was a Starbucks, and everyone was huddling to Starbucks. So then he realized, oh my God, the whole element of globalization is now, it's like it's the world is global now. There's no Italy, there's no US anymore. It's just like World Wide Web where we all live in. So in that template, like what's your sort of perspective on what is the landscape of leadership in this global economy? Like what do you think is the fabric of the current leader today is? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things with that. Number one is there's a degree of authenticity that the economy and the global market is looking for in leaders. And let me kind of talk a little bit about that and kind of what I see. With social media and with the immediate access we have to all different types of information, I think that individuals are becoming much more savvy and much more sensitive to things that they see as fake and not real. Now, we know that everything out on the internet is real, right? Well, no, that's not the case. But I think that that people are becoming much more discerning and potentially much more skeptical of folks that are not authentic. And I think in leaders, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're putting all of your dirty laundry out there for everyone to see. But what it does mean is if you're facing a challenging situation in a complex global market, I think it's perfectly reasonable for that leader to say, you know what, folks, we're going through some challenging times. I'm in this with you. We're in this together. Things are shifting. We're going to figure this out, but I need you to hang with me. Okay. The leader of the past may say, you know what, there's no issues. Everything's fine. And almost put their head in the sand. And their teams know that is not the case. So, I think that authenticity piece is one. I think the other thing too, and I talk a lot about this with leaders, is we are always in the public eye and always on stage. Okay. The years in the past when my dad was a human resource manager at a company, and he would go to work during the day and then go home, and then you don't have to worry about it. Now, everyone has immediate access to everything we are and do. So as much as we have to be authentic, we also need to be intentional as leaders in how we are communicating. How are we presenting a leadership presence in everything that we do? How are we connecting with others that aren't going to alienate them, but are going to bring them into a collaborative relationship, so that even things that may not be work related, folks can see in us, and it impacts our perception of that leader. So I think those are two really important things that folks have so much access to today, but really impact our effectiveness as a leader.
Interesting. That's a great point, by the way. And I think when I was talking, I think one thing I was thinking about was, say, whenever you talk about leadership, you talk about the tribes they lead, right? So every leader leads a tribe, and then when we look in the past, it was pretty. I think it was pretty obvious. Like I can see my village. I can see my villagers. Right. I can see exactly who Sam is or Andy is. I exactly can sort of picturize that, and I can say, okay, I can build that empathy that whatever my action is impacting who, and I've seen those families. Now in the age of, I think you brought up an interesting point. Then in the age of internet, how can and I think, to me, leadership, if you talk about Martin Luther King, if you talk about Gandhi, the aspect that made them great leader was the aspect of empathy, the ability to connect with the common masses or common tribes, right? Now in the age of internet, when I don't even know like 99.9% of my workforce, I'm not seeing them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
How can I stay empathetic? Like, what are some of your thoughts on if I'm a leader of such organization, or at least getting in the template? How could I build the tribal, or at least get the tribal simulation in me, that I understand that this is a tribe that I'm trying to lead, and I'm responsible for their health and well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that every one of us needs to be thinking about all the time. And why I say all of us is I'm a firm believer that every one of us are leading every single day. We may not be in a formal position of leadership, but looking at leadership through the definition of having influence, which is the definition I love from John Maxwell, we are having influence every single day. So how do we have influence and lead well in a high technology area and really connect in that empathy? Number one, I think we have to be insatiably curious. Oftentimes as leaders, we feel like I've got to stand up and I've got to shout from the mountaintops what my thoughts are or what my views are. Okay? What people want is to be seen and to be heard and to be known. So I would encourage leaders to ask great questions. What is it that's concerning you today? What are some of the things that you're having great success in today? What are some of the challenges you're facing? And by asking those great questions of those that are around you, it's going to give you a view of what's important to them, how you can help, how you can lead well, and really on the empathy side, how you can connect in an authentic way. So I think being naturally curious. Number two is I think leaders also need to do a great job of communicating and being available. This even goes back to I remember early on, in my career, the leaders that had the greatest impact for me were those that didn't sit behind their desk and didn't have a closed door, but they were out, they were walking around, they were engaged with people. So, I think that, for leaders, that hallway has now gone from a brick and mortar hallway to a virtual hallway that is much wider, much longer, and you have a greater impact of interaction with people. So being aware when you're walking down that hallway, how are you coming across? And for me, that goes all the way back to that intentionality. And I do a lot of things with blogging and videos. Just part of my makeup is I love to encourage people. So I think that for leaders, know that there are three things. There's the optimist, there's the realist, and the pessimist. There's room for leaders to be an optimist and a realist. There's no room to be a pessimist. So, part of my approach is, how am I going to be an optimist and an encourager and help to challenge people to think of new things and to be the best that they can be? And that runs through everything that I communicate. I remember one time I was having a rough day or a down day, and I think I put something negative out on social media or whatever. And I had so many people reach out to me. This is not you. What's going on? What's happening? But the way that we present is recognized, and we have such the opportunity for impact through that as well.
Interesting. So from your perspective or from your vantage point, what would you prefer, a realist or an optimist?
You know what? I think I think I don't think it's an either or, it's a both and. And if I were to break it down, I would say I would like to have 70% optimist, and probably 60% optimist, 40% realist. I want an optimist that is looking to the future, that is doing strategy, that's visioning, which is a critical part of leadership. But then I want a realist and the decisions that they're making today based on the information that's provided. And there are some leaders that they operate 90% in the optimist and the visioning side. And the people around them are scratching their heads saying, are you not seeing the reality of what we're dealing with today? And then there are others that operate so much in the realist side that they miss the value of the visioning. And, I think that's why for me, when I talk about high impact leadership, there's really 5 characteristics or domains that I talk about: character, growth, relationships being the first 3. And then this is where kind of the realistic optimist, results, that is very realistic focused, and then visioning, which is kind of the optimistic side. So I know that's a long answer to a potentially short question, but I think it really is a combination of both. And we have to be able to move back and forth through those based on where our focus is and where our thought process needs to be at that point.
Interesting. So, great point. So I remember talking to one of leading sports manufacturers, senior executive, and he was telling me an interesting story. So he said, Vishal, you know what? Every week I try to go out and look at kids on the soccer field or kids on the playing fields and see how they enjoy their sports gear, how they're playing with
Yeah.
it, how they're using it, and that helps me sort of create that appreciation for the product, number one. And number two, try to, because I never got get to see at my level the real user, which are probably those kids that are playing with
Yeah.
it, how much they're enjoying those apparels. So how would you rate that from the leadership perspective? Like, what is it too much? Is it like too much understanding into the getting into the process, or like what's your evaluation of this style of empathy or leadership?
Yeah, I absolutely love that story of that leader that would actually go out and look at the consumer, the end user of their product, and see what is that experience like for them.
Hmm.
And I all too often, I've seen leaders that will sit in a boardroom and they'll speculate and they'll think, well, this is what we need to do, and this is what people want, and all of that. And the reality is, we have to get data
Hmm.
from those that we are serving, our customers, our shareholders, our stakeholders. Those are the people that are going to help to tell us. So when you think about being naturally curious
Hmm.
in building relationships and the empathy and into the individual, the leader needs to be also curious into the broader scheme of things. How are we seeing shifts in consumer behavior and in individual behavior, and what are the things that we need to be aware of in this, so that we can be strategic in making decisions down the road.
Interesting. Fascinating. So I think one thing that I was thinking about. So if I, like, this is what we hear a lot from many of folks, that you grow into a leadership from a worker role, right? So you have been very process oriented. You have like no appreciation many times for your fellow, because you're too busy delivering on your task, and suddenly you're put on sort of this role of managing people and sort of understanding their requirement, and you have been a hyper performers or whatever those things are. If I'm an up and coming leader, like what do you suggest that how can I sort of train myself to become a leader? Like what are some of the fabric or some of the vintage or some of the fabric of leadership that one must carry
Yeah.
and one must train for?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a vice president today on that exact topic. We were talking about the shifting dynamics in his organization, and him moving folks up. And I made that exact point, is sometimes we look to the high individual contributing performer and say, let's move you into a leadership role, or let's move you into a managerial role. And number one, it may not be aligned with their greater strengths. It may not be aligned with what they really love to do. And I think I'm going to answer your question about what individuals can do to prepare for that. But I want to do a quick shout out to organizations, that we need to get away from thinking that advancement is only vertical. There's the thought process out there that if I'm not, if I'm not, stepping up from line level to manager to director to VP to executive, that I'm not successful. And one of the things that I really work hard in organizations to create is a dynamic experience of growth. So some people don't want to go this way. Some people would love to just learn different things and have opportunities to grow in that way. That's filling their potential and their impact bucket. So organizations, please look at a dynamic experience of progression. But I would say this for the individual that knows that they want to have higher levels of responsibility and leadership. I think it really starts with a lot of the work that I'm doing now, is starting with an inside out approach to growing yourself, and then how you're making an impact through others. So first, start with your character. Are you authentic? Are you real? Are you living a life of high integrity? Do you know what your values are? Are you able to connect with yourself and with others in an authentic way? Those are all aspects of character. And the reality is that character is not like a fingerprint that is part of you when you're born. It's developed over time, and you have to be intentional with that.
Interesting.
This,
Yep, sorry.
the second thing I would say is you've got to make growth and learning a part of who you are. I've used the term before, be naturally curious. Look for opportunities to learn, to mentor, to teach, be a reader. So be a sponge with that. Next is to build great relationships. So start looking at who do you need to connect with and how can you help those other people? Because at the end of the day, leadership is not a one-person game. It is impacting results through others. And then I've already talked about the results side. So start looking at what are those measures of success? What are the outcomes that are important in the organization that you're a part of, and start considering the steps that need to be taken in order to achieve those. When you're thinking in those terms, you're thinking from a leader's lens instead of just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. And then the fifth area is the visioning. And, to truly be a leader, it's not about what am I doing today. There's a balance between that and where do I want to be down the road? So how am I dreaming? How am I creating? How am I creating strategy? Those type of things. So character on the inside, growth in how I'm learning, relationships with others, the results, and then strategizing for the future.
Interesting.
That's the pathway to being a leader.
Interesting. I think that's a very, very holistic framework. And thank you so much for walking us through each step. I think it's pretty useful. So let's talk about, I think, so you talked about that these are the transformative times. I think we even before the podcast, we were talking about how technology is shifting and impacting sort of the workforce. Now, when things are going great, right? It's great to be a leader, right? It doesn't hurt to be a leader. Like everything is green, barely anything is red, right? But when there's a transformation there, even the company's sort of fabric doesn't know what's transforming, and in fact the floor that we are standing on is shifting on its own. So now when you're leading an organization that is going through this massive array of transformation, which is pretty much like right now most of the companies today, it's very hard to be a leader when things are shaky at its core. So from your perspective, like what is the definition or what is the fabric of a great leader during tough times or during sort of the challenging times? What would you say?
It's a great question, and a lot of that again comes back into change management and sometimes, as you mentioned, kind of the shifting fabric and the shifting sand. I think in my experience, maybe two or three things that really stand out to successful leaders in helping to navigate change. I think the first thing is you've got to stay visible, available, and connected. Okay. There's a natural tendency when things start to go wrong to retreat. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean, I quit, I'm leaving my job, but we'll go back. We won't be as accessible. We won't be as available because people are going to have questions. And we feel like I'm not in a position where I can answer those questions. Okay. And when team members see a leader not as accessible and not as available, it creates trepidation for them. There must be something going on. What's happening? Is there a problem? And leaders need to intentionally, during those tough times, be even more available. And the reality is, it's okay to say, yeah, you know what, we're facing some challenges. We got some great opportunities ahead. We're working really, really closely as a leadership team to help to navigate this. We would love your ideas and your opinions. We're going to take your opportunity to do that. But I think that in particular is so important. I think the second thing in navigating change is not just being available, but also being open to hearing other ideas and realizing that you don't have to carry this all by yourself. Okay. Through my doctoral dissertation, one of the things that, the focus of the study was the relationship between life balance and work stress in corporate executives. Okay? And the reality is, what I heard time after time after time is executives feel like that they have to be Teflon, that nothing sticks to them, that they're bulletproof, that everything is great. And sometimes it's okay to, not necessarily to say, woe is me, but to be open with, what, we are facing some challenges. And then I think the third thing, and this is one of the things I'd love to say about the leadership team that I work with today, and I work to build this, is it's almost a leadership group that is so flexible and so agile that and they have a great figure it out factor. Okay, so oftentimes there's curveballs that are coming at us all the time, and if we're so focused on this is the direction that we need to go, we're going to get pummeled with these balls. But if we can pivot and we can swerve and we can move a little bit and have that agility to adjust, then the dynamics of change and the challenges of change can actually be minimized. So I guess those would be the three things that I would think of that leaders can do specifically during times of change that would be even better for them and their teams.
I think well said. And when you were pitching that, I think one story that comes to my mind was, so I spoke to one of the leader at one of the telecommunication company, and he's from Marine background. So he was an ex-Marine, and he was telling me, Vishal, you know what? And I was talking to him about this transformative times, and sort of telco is going through its own sort of stress and struggles. And his perspective was, what they teach us in Marine. So I said, tell me that story. So he said that it's all about the fire drill. I said, what do you mean by it's all about the fire drill? So his point was that when you were a kid, you're taught this fire drill, right? And the reason being that whenever actually the fire happens, you don't have to think. You just act. Right. Like the neurons is already set, all the connection pathways are set, so you can react to that. Now, when I'm with Marie, like when I'm sort of at a war situation, I have to freaking work, like test all those fire drills in like 1700 version of that fire drill in any possible way, right? But even we know that we cannot sort of completely sort of cover everything. So what help us at the end of the day is, I think, and you pointed out beautifully, is availability, right? So his perspective was that that I'm there. If something mess up and I'm the smartest leader, it's okay. I'm there. All we have to do is either die for great people or die with great people. So which is like, I was like, this is fascinating. So I said, I hope like you can freaking teach every leader to be, and his point of view is like the aspect of transformation is not to save yourself, but to everyone should go through it. And try to do whatever you can. It's not just saving yourself on that. So what's your take on that?
I think that's brilliant. And one of the things that I love about folks that are in the military is, even though the arena that they operate in is so complex, they try to keep the decisions to be made so simple and so few. Okay. So, for example, I went through this season for myself. I was like, I need to get rid of as much complexity as I can. So, I mean, as silly as this sounds, I made the decision, kind of like Steve Jobs, that I was wearing jeans and a black shirt every day. So I didn't have to get up, and I didn't have to think about, okay, what slacks am I going to wear? What pants is this going to fit? In my sweater vest, all that stuff. I wore the same thing. And Michelle, the thing is, I had more bandwidth to make other decisions. Okay. So there's a part of our lives that habits can actually release creative potential. Now, some people might agree with that because they think that habits are too constraining. I want to be able to, be me and be flexible. But, in my experience, sometimes to remove as much complexity as we can, it then puts us in a place where we have the brain power and the emotional power to make even the more complicated decisions that we have to navigate easier to do. So, for leaders, eliminate as much of the complexity as you can so that you can be even better.
That's a great point, and thank you for sharing that. And one thing that again I was recalling from your conversation that you said, okay, I want to appreciate the organization that are brewing these leaders. So, what is the role of an organization in creating great leader, and how from your vantage point, how can they do it effectively?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, for the organizations to create a place where emerging leaders can operate, they can stumble and fall, and they can get back up. I think one of the great tragedies in any company that almost has a zero tolerance policy for any type of error, it's going to hold leaders back from taking a risk and as a result learning through that. So create an environment where your current or emerging leaders can risk and run ahead. I think the second thing is look for ways that you can align your leaders with their strengths. And I do a lot of work. I love StrengthsFinder. You've probably heard of that, and I'm sure that a lot of your guests have used it. I love that as a means to say, here's how I'm made. Here's the greater strengths that I can bring. Now let's look at how we can then align those with the needs in the organization. When we do that, we're bringing two forces together, almost like a magnet, that here's the need, here's what I bring, and we're connected, as opposed to trying to force what someone would naturally bring against something that we really don't need. So look for that opportunity as well. And I think the third thing is we need to do a whole lot better at celebrating successes. There's a gentleman that I used to work with. He was a CEO of another company, and I heard this phrase so many times. He said, "I always look for the crooked picture. I always look for the crooked picture." And I mean, the reality is, yes, we need to solve those things, but we need to also be celebrating the successes, because that becomes a motivator for folks to take another step forward. If we're always looking for what's wrong, we're always going to see what's wrong. But if we're looking at what's going great and then also balance it with that, it's going to give us motivation to go forward even faster.
I think that's a great point. I know a lot of sort of contacts that I am in touch with. They are having hard time in celebrating success, and I think like we are so prone to figuring out, and because they're always looking for all the negatives, that sometimes they just lose track of all the positives that are happening around. And I think it's well said. And how can you do that? Like, can you teach yourself to? Because I think to me it's a personality trait. Like, can you really train yourself to be an appreciator when you have not been doing it forever?
Yeah, I think that there are some personalities that are more open to that, but I would say it's a habit that you can develop in yourself, and it's a behavior that you develop. So, like, for example, I've written it's a kind of a life success system. It's called the Life Leadership Success System, and I have quarterly books. For me, I've tried all the technology to keep myself, organized. And the reality is I'm a kinesthetic learner. So I love to write things down. So I said, you know what? I give up on it. I'm going to create something that's going to work for me. And feedback that I've received has been just so positive on this. But one of the things that I have in there is a review every week to say, what were some of the things that I'm thankful for or that I'm grateful for this week? Okay. And just starting to develop that habit in your life of looking at those things then helps to translate that into the business. The other thing that I do, I call it my big three questions. And this can apply to any situation that you're in. I use this a lot in executive coaching that I do. But I always start with what's working well. Then I ask what's not working well and what could be different that would be better. And so those are my big three questions. But starting it out with what's working well takes people's heads into a different place. And you would be amazed at how many people, when I say, so what's working well, they'll immediately go to a negative. And I said, nope, let's bring it back. I want to hear what's working well for you now. And people aren't comfortable with that because we're socialized. We gotta fix something. And having someone sit in that uncomfortableness and really thinking, okay, these are the things that are going great.
Interesting.
It just opens our mind up to a whole lot more possibility.
I think beautiful point, Jason. I think so. I remember like I went to I think it's a life coach or something, and she told me the same thing. Hey, Vishal, write. I think she gave me like 4 positives and 4 negatives, and just she said 4 negatives and 4 positive. My negatives have another negative in it, so it's like a layer of negatives. But when it comes to positive, I was like, I just couldn't write anything. I just like I was very detailed about everything that's messed up. But I have and when she was just sort of say no, go back, think of something, and I crafted some BS and she said no, go back, like this is again you're not getting the point. Reduce your negatives and sort of get just one. And it was so and I would love to tell our viewers and listeners, it's really a nightmare if you have not done that. Getting that clean.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I do almost the same thing, but for folks, especially folks that have not taken advantage of coaching before, I'll have them just write positives. Don't write any negatives. Right. And I can't tell you how many times I'll come back and there'll be nothing written down on a piece of paper. And I'll say, let's talk through this. And when we slow down enough that we really consider, we can see the great things. But we're not, oftentimes we're not socialized to do that initially. We're socialized. We got to fix it. We're fixers. And
that's a beautiful point, I think, and thank you so much for sharing that and putting it. So, is there any future-proof leader? Like, what do you think? Like, if I'm getting into this again, transformative times, and you laid down beautifully some of the ways I can keep myself sane and keep myself sort of understand this complexity of leadership. How can I keep myself future-proof, or do I really need to worry about? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah. So wait, when you say future-proof, do you mean that you're not a victim of the future?
Right. Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah. That's. I think a lot of it comes back to adaptability and flexibility. I know we've all heard this quote before, but the only constant is change. So recognizing that is going to continually be a part of our leadership and the life cycle of our businesses and all of those type of things, it is maintaining that constant openness and behavior of flexibility. I talk often with companies, and it was actually, gosh, 2 weeks ago, I was
Mm,
having a strategic planning conversation with a company, and I said, the typical life cycle of a business. I'm going to try to do this on the camera and see if it goes up. So we grow,
mm,
and
mm,
then you reach a plateau,
mm,
and then you have a decline
mm,
phase. And what you have to be looking at is, at this inflection point before you go to plateau, what do you do to press reset so that you can keep that growth going to the next phase, and then press reset again and go to the growth of the next phase, so that you
mm,
don't ever get into a complacent plateau mode. It's a whole lot easier to
mm.
keep a focus on the opportunities for the future as you're growing up, so that you don't get complacent. And I think that's one of the keys for leaders to be future proof, is not to get into a place of complacency, but always be looking at, what do I need to do to adjust, to adapt, to change myself, my organization, to meet the needs of my customer today and tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're almost at the tail end of the conversation. And Jason, thank you so much. You have been like super candid about this complicated process, and I think human mind is not easy, and that while leading that bunch of human mind is, again, that's not easy either. So thank you so much
That's
for shedding
right.
some light on that. So now let's spend a few minutes on you, like your background, your journey. So if what are some of the tenets of your success? Like, if I say 1, 2, 3 elements or sort of tenets that has really helped you kept sane, what would that be?
I think it is, I think the first thing for me is such a crystal clarity of my purpose and my mission. And I think we shared even before the conversation, and I worked on this for, it wasn't a short time. It was probably 3 years, 4 years, to really get this refined. But for me, my purpose is changing lives and growing leaders. So what helps me stay sane is anything that I do, anything that I think, anything that I'm dreaming of, preparing for, building, any of that. If it doesn't fit in one of those two areas, then I push it off to the side. I said that's for someone else to do. That's not for me to do. I think the second thing for me is surrounding myself with incredible people. And I remember early on in my career, I was that manager, I guess, kind of emerging leader, that I thought I was the one that had to be involved with everything. Any decisions had to come through me. So I was on call 24/7. I couldn't take a vacation without checking my email all the time, or being on calls. It's been probably 10 years ago that I said, that's not who I'm going to be anymore. And I always surround myself with great people. So when I'm with my family, or if I take a vacation, I can truly step away and know that the organization is in good hands, because I have prepared folks to be able to take those steps. And then, I think the third thing for me is just that gratitude piece. It was really life changing for me, and I was able to get through a lot of anger and resentment and jealousy and pride when I said, you know what, I'm going to be focused on the things I'm grateful for and the things that I do well. Yes, I'm going to bring value in all these other areas as well. But having that attitude of gratitude, and what I say is, be grateful in everything and complacent in nothing. And I think that is huge. That be grateful for where you are, but always driving ahead. And it's that balance for me that's kept me sane and kept me successful all these years.
Interesting. And one thing I'd love to know, I think we ask our guests to share their favorite reads or their favorite books that they want to share. Do you have any book that you want to share with our listeners and viewers? And we also know you wrote a book. I think it's called Reset. So
I did.
And talk me about that book, and if you have any other recommendation for our folks.
Yeah, I hate to be self-serving in that, but I would love everybody to go get a copy of Reset. But yeah, it's a book that I wrote. It's really about pushing the reset button on your life, and
Mm.
it's a practical guide to help people think about what do you want your life to be, and I take people through different seasons of their life, and what would you be thinking and feeling and experiencing, and who would you be connecting with, and what would you be doing through those different seasons. And then I help people look at their life to create balance, because we know that when you build on a firm foundation of balance, then you're able to continue to build all other areas of life. Then I look at the direction in your life. So what's your life purpose? What's your passion? What are your plans and your goals for achieving that? How do you overcome obstacles? And then how do
Mm.
you be grateful in that? So I lay it out. I've got a lot of assessments in there where you can kind of self-explore, but it's something that was on my heart for years and years. I see it in executives, and I see it in really everyone I work with. So thank you for the call out on that. I've written another book called Your Daily Reset, which is kind of
Mm.
daily quotes and probing questions to get you to consider your life. That was kind of a follow-up that people were asking for from Reset. But as far as another book that I think has really made an impact on my life, and you can see behind me, I've got my little
Good riddance.
library. I'm a firm believer that leaders are readers, so I always try to make
Mm.
that a part. But on my desk, I've got a book that is called Essentialism, and it's
Mm.
by Greg McCowan, and it's the subtitle is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And I tell you what, for me, that was such a huge wake up call. And as you kind of went through my biography at the beginning, I'm involved in a lot of different things, and I'm motivated to do that because I'm always looking at how can I change lives and grow leaders. But for me, this book really challenged me to think about, is what I'm doing
Mm.
and how I'm investing my time, my talent, my treasure, etc., the best. And
Mm.
it challenged me to really say no to a lot of things that put me in the place where I could be my best every day. So I would encourage everybody to check it out. Essentialism by Greg McCowan.
Beautiful. And now at the last question, but not least, what would you like to take away? What would you like our viewers and listeners to take away from this conversation, like that we have not talked before, or what's your closing remark for our listeners and viewers?
Oh wow! I guess my closing remark, because I focus so much on leadership and helping to
Mm.
grow high impact leaders from the inside out, is that every single person listening to this is a leader.
Mm.
You are having an impact and an influence every single day, whether it's that person that is you're running the checkout line at your grocery store, to the person that's in your office that maybe you're challenged with something, to wherever, your spouse, your kiddos. You are leading every single day. So take that with great responsibility and be intentional with growing as a leader every day. And when you do that, your impact, your legacy will be greater than you can ever imagine.
Beautiful. And with that said, thank you so much, Jason, for again spending really being very gracious with your time and sort of walking us through such a complicated piece when we are going in this world of transformative leadership. It's really remarkable to hear a refreshing thought and sort of some perspective that will help us. You're always welcome on the podcast to share your journey, and with that said, thank you so much, and wish you nothing but success in your journey in keeping leadership and leaders sane. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. You're an incredible host, and I just wish you all the best as well.
Yeah, I just I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on the